Thank you for both of you. That's a great point they gave us to us just now. Let me continue with the negative consequences of separation of power in the administrative of a state.
Okay, thank you. In my view, the negative consequence of separation of power in the administration of a state is an expensive form of government, such as the government has to allocate more resources in order to employ the three groups of people in the branches: the executive, the legislative, and judiciary, are all substantially paid for their position to sustain the system. If every branch is merged, the government does not need to provide a lot of money or resources for paying the group of people in the branches. The government needs only pay a person or a group to pay three groups of people. Thank you.
Oh, this debate getting more excited here. Okay, can Abu make this debate become more interesting?
Well, Mira, I don't mean to condemn the system, but don't you think it takes a long time in making policy of division? The system divided the government into the different branches. Therefore, the more time is needed to launch any conflict that may exist between the executive and the legislative department. When power are separate without any strategy, it will take time in terms of agreement. For example, the law of death penalty, whoever found guilty of baby dumping. Before the law was made, the issue must go into the parliament to be debated. Then it goes to the first reading, second reading, third reading, and lastly fourth reading. And after it, consider it as a serious matter. Dewan Negara approve it with the Yang di-Pertuan Agong consent.
That's a really excellent point from Kamarul. Can you give another point about the negative consequences?
Okay, another point.
Yes.
Okay, the point is lack of coordination between the legislative and the executive is where the executive and the legislative is separate. The executive will suffer. Lack of cooperation from the legislative in the term of legislation. There is no coordination between the legislative and the executive during drafting of legislation because there is no political side that binds the executive and the legislature. They look at the amount the legislation that request by the executive. This may lead to a great loop of legislation. Abu, can you give me a best at the last point of negative consequence of separation of power in the administration of the state?
Of course. I would like to quote my last point on negative consequences of separation of power, which is bias of personal interest. Don't you think that the legislative also consists of a judge? A judge, known as the legislature, is under a duty not to adjudicate on cases in which he has either can interest, whether personal or financial, or where he may influence by bias. For example, a judge also, like everyone else, he or she may be biased by races, gender, politics, background, association, and opinion. When adjudication, they must be demonstrated as impartial. Impartiality involves the judge must listen to each side with equal attention. Whatever his belief, the judge should seek to give effect to common value of community. For example, Dr. Sri Anwar Ibrahim proven not guilty for sodomy because of lack of evidence.
Sorry.
We don't consider on Saiful Anwar's side. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Abu Kamarul, for giving us the last point of our discussion. government system has strength and weaknesses in administration of the state. Let us think for a moment. Which side is suitable in administrating the state so that the citizens know where to state their right for the certain branch in the government? That's all for our debate and on the separation of power for today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The audience has any question for us?
Can you elaborate more about the existence of check and balance mechanism of the power?
Okay, thank you. What's your name?
Serena.
Serena, okay, thank you for your question. Okay, I will explain the existence of check and balance mechanism of the power. Okay. The structure of government is great so that one power may be functioning as a balance against another power. For example, the executive makes a mistake in making decisions, the judiciary or the legislative are able to identify and correct it. Okay, refer to check and balance. I will give you for one example. The executive power has the power to enact law, but the executive makes the wrong law, so the judiciary interprets it and corrects it. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Assalamualaikum to the debater. Okay, my name is Inshira. Okay, as we know, in our country we also use the separation of power, right? There is executive, legislature, and judiciary. But in our country, there are connections between executive and legislature. But why must the judiciary power must be free and with anybody else? Because there are no connection between the executive and there are no combination between them.
Okay, thank you, Shira, for the long question. Okay, in Malaysia, they use fusion of power, the combination of executive and the legislative. Why the judiciary must be separated? Okay, I explain it. Why? Because the judiciary it must be a stand alone. Because the judiciary is a powerful power in a state. Because the judiciary interprets the law and make it the law. If the judiciary combined with executive, bad. For example, I have the power of judiciary and executive. I will make a new law because I, the executive, enact the law and judiciary court. The judge may make a new law.
Okay, thank you for the great
Okay,
explanation.
Shira and Irina, take your prize.